a grenade detonated next to me and the people I was with.
What hit you?
It did. Yeah, I went down this, or not. I was not a team leader or anything. I was just part of a group, and we were led down this alleyway. And it's the middle of the night. It was after a day of a lot of fighting back and forth. And we basically arrived at this T intersection in this fairly urban village where we were anticipating coming to this T, like walking down here and coming to this T where there was this wall, and we were expecting to look out across this field and see potentially some enemy combatants. We were just going to see what they were doing. But we ended up walking down, and we have night vision on, we're walking silently, you know, maneuvering down this alleyway, and we get to the wall, and just stuff happens. The intel was backwards. They were actually on the immediate other side of the wall versus, you know, 100, 200 yards away. And so we were kind of put into a position where we ran the risk of being heard if we turned around and tried to leave. You know, your footsteps make noise. They hadn't heard us yet. And so in short, it turned into an incredibly close quarters contact. And the folks on the other side of the wall, we believe they were holding grenades with pins out, like literally for this actual moment. In case we get compromised, we're taking them out with us. And they lobbed the grenades right over the wall right after the shooting began. And I remember I was like right behind somebody who was engaging them, and I watched, like it was in slow motion. It wasn't, but I will tell you, when you literally think you're gonna die, you get like weird, like tunnel vision or something. I remember we had a drone overhead that was sending down an infrared signal that was like flashing. So on night vision, you could see this, it's like a spotlight. Imagine if God had a flashlight shining it down on the earth. That's what it looks like. It's actually bizarre. But only on night vision you can see it, and it's a flashing strobe, and it was like right over us. And I remember the flash was like going like this, but in the flash, I saw this grenade, like I'd see it and it would disappear in the darkness, see it in the flash, disappear in the darkness as it's like coming over the wall. And then it hit my shoulder, and I remember like distinctly thinking, please let the grenade detonate below my head so that it'll kill me, but it won't blow my head off, and that at least my family will be able to identify me. And so this happened in like a split second, but it's like it hits my shoulder, and then it fell down towards the ground, and as it followed down my body, I'm like, okay, good, maybe it'll hit my legs, and it'll just take my legs out. Hits the ground, and I was able to turn, and everybody just kind of turned, and it detonated. And it just felt like someone took a big handful of rocks and just like threw it at the back of my legs and my back. My sense of what happened there or my memory of what happened is completely backwards. It took years to piece it all together. But the short version is I was basically down on the ground, bleeding to death. We're also in the middle of like a very intimate engagement with people on the other side of this wall. And my medic, who's also a SEAL, he was the only guy who was not directly injured by the frag of the grenade. He was concussed. He was not himself, but under fire, like from this close, and people miss from this close when you're that jacked up on adrenaline. So you're not like getting actively shot a million times. He like began dragging people out. He literally saved my life. He pulled me. I was in and out of consciousness, couldn't put my tourniquet on. You know, I was bleeding pretty bad from my leg, and he dragged me to cover as much as we could, and he literally laid over me and put my tourniquets on, and he was like so calm. You know, he's like, hey, it's gonna be fine. Like literally
trained for it.
Wow. It's crazy, yeah. And so, but the crazy part is it was kind of quiet in the city at the time, but once all the shooting started, the other fighters in the town, they just began like arbitrarily firing like rockets roughly in our direction. Like they don't care if they hit their own people, they're just trying to hit us. And so like rockets are coming in and like gunfire is coming in. And we actually, we had to call, no, I didn't, I'm down and out for the count basically, but the guy who's a JTAC, they control overhead planes and stuff, calling in bombs. They called in an airstrike like 10 feet away from us to like take these guys out. But it was
10 feet away, don't they explode, and couldn't you get
10 feet might be an exaggeration. It was on the other side of that wall, so the fragmentation
was the wall see-through? Was it like a fence, or was
it
like
a
concrete cement?
No, it was like mud bricks.
Okay.
You know, so kind of like a cement wall. But yeah, I ended up getting medevaced out along with another guy who his lung collapsed from the frag. But we got medevaced out, and I literally within 48 hours had been pulled from the battlefield to a field hospital. And actually when I got to the field hospital, that's the first stop we went after getting medically evacuated, a message had come out to the base where this field hospital was. It was like 30 minutes away, and there was a bunch of SEALs that were stationed at this base, and they didn't know necessarily how badly injured, like me or the guy that was also getting medevaced, how badly injured we were. And so there was like a potential that in theory we could be being brought to the hospital and we could already be dead, or we might die, right? And so out of like respect, all these SEALs in the middle of the night put on their best uniforms, which nobody had nice uniforms overseas. They're ratty. But like guys put on like the equivalent of their dress uniforms and walked into the tent, and they were lining the back of this. Like imagine like literally what a movie would do with like a field hospital. It's literally a big tent with all these surgeons with like white suits on and gloves on. And then in the back behind all the medical equipment was like 30 Navy SEALs in their uniforms, which were all mismatched, you know, because no one brings those. And I remember I got wheeled in before I was put under for surgery, and it dawned on me that like I didn't know the extent of my injuries. I thought that I was going to be okay because I'm like, I'm alive, I got the tourniquet on, but I saw the looks on, it's a very small tent too, I'm seeing the looks on my teammates' faces, and they're in their uniforms, and I'm like, oh my God, like this might be it, I might die in here. And I remember trying to reassure them that I wasn't going to die, but I had no idea. I have no idea what's going on. And I remember that they looked at my wounds and they were like, yeah, you were very close. I guess the way the shrapnel went into my leg and my back was just narrowly missed fatal. But anyways, I got shipped to Germany. I was there for a week, and then I was home and in Home Depot like 2 weeks later. Like,
how do you assimilate back into society after that? That's what I can imagine, that nothing is the same. It's like, how do you just go about daily life having just experienced that?
Well, I actually was talking about this with my wife. I came back and believed very much that I was going to I'd be fine kind of reassimilating. But they call it being in the red is the description used for what it's like to come back from a deployment, where it's kind of like you're still in that almost primal state of living, where like you've pushed aside everything else in your life except for, you know, fight, live, you know, and just be on deployment. And so you come back home, and it takes a little bit to get away from that feeling, to become less primal, to become civilized again. But you totally are not aware of it. Even if you've been told, hey, you know, you just came back from a deployment, you need to calm down, you don't think you are. You think you're perfectly fine. But you're so like wound up. I'm sure you're probably smiling about this. He did a combat tour, and it was in Iraq. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna give Nick a shout out, even though you can't see him. He did a tour in Iraq where he was one of the last people to do like manned turret gunning. Now we use remote control weapons on the top. So he was like fully exposed, like driving in the most contested and urban parts of Iraq, getting shot at. Anyways, gnarly deployment. We had remote controlled guns in an up armored vehicle that was completely bomb proof. So if we got shot at, we were like completely safe. But I was just like really, really mad. Like I remember there's a funny story. Within like a couple of days of getting back to my house in Virginia Beach, I'm like literally limping around. I'm like still hurt. And I remember, so we lived in this house that was part of a homeowners association, like an HOA. You familiar with how HOAs work?
I'm in one.
Yeah, so am I.
Of course you are. Of course, yeah. Do you know how that works, too? And
what's HOA stand? Oh, no, I'm kidding.
And I got back, and my wife, Amanda, she's like, hey, John, just so you know, like we got an email from the HOA saying that our chimney cap is rusted and we need to like replace it, right? And I'm like, no, we will not. And I called the HOA and I was like, do you have any fucking clue what I've just been through? And you're going to tell me I need to change my chimney cap? And they're like, sir, we don't know who you are. We don't know what you've been doing. You know what I mean? Like, how would they know what the hell I was doing? It was like so like unhinged that I believed that I could just throw it in everybody's face that like, I served, you're going to be nice to me, you know? And they still made me change the chimney cap. Yeah, I just was like hair trigger temper for a while. But then you kind of like just reassemble, or you get back into it. But I would say candidly, the injury totally changed my desire to want to be in the military. I remember I was able to heal up and get into another platoon, so do another workup and deployment. But I was like not healthy. So the blast of the explosion. It dislocated both of my shoulders and created a slap tear. So just like the shock of the blast wave, it dislocated both my shoulders. So it tore both of my labrums. which is like it's a very fixable thing if you get surgery for it. But I didn't have the time to do the full surgery and recovery. I'd miss a rotation. I wouldn't be able to deploy again. And so I got what's called a biceps tendinosis, which is like the equivalent of putting a Band-Aid on your torn labrum. But it's like permanent. They cut a portion of your bicep, they pull it out, and they staple it or something onto some part of your bicep. I don't even know how it works, but it's a permanent Band-Aid, which means you deal with like pain, but it's more functional. So I had some shoulder issues. I still have 26 pieces of shrapnel in my hip and my ankle that are like, depending on the weather, it'll like, it's hard to run, because the pain from the shrapnel. Wow. Yeah. And so over the course of the second deployment, I just like deteriorated physically, mentally, emotionally. And I was already thinking about getting out of the military by the time we got back from South America. And I was already talking to like my medic and, I forget, corpsman, that's like the person in the military who does medical. And they're like, look, you were able to deploy a second time, but, we're going to push for a medical retirement based largely on the injury from Afghanistan, which clearly has had ripple effects physically, emotionally, mentally. I was a shit show. I was just like not a happy person. And so I got medically retired. So I don't know how I got to that tangent.
Award. You got a medal, right?
Well, yeah. So you get an award for getting hurt. You get a Purple Heart, which really just means you got hurt. It is an award, and I'm not. It's definitely one that I'm proud to have. I think that technically, to get the Purple Heart, the purple ribbon, I think you literally have to bleed in a war. I think there's like the stipulation is you literally must bleed in a foreign war. So it's like kind of gnarly to have a Purple Heart. So that was cool. And it was honestly the whole experience now was a good one. Yeah. I feel very well adjusted now, but I've done extensive therapy and still go to therapy to keep myself right.